Thanks for having me. I've prepped some material on career advancement, and I'll intro myself really quick and then give an agenda. So my name again is Therese. I'm from Atlanta. I grew up in Atlanta, went to school in Atlanta and Georgia, but these days I live in California. I work for Meta. And I love design. I'm so passionate about all types of design, especially product design and UX. It's so cool to be able to work in a field where you get paid to be empathetic and build beautiful things and beautiful products. And so I just can't believe that we get to do what we do. I've always been ambitious, so I've done a lot of reading and thinking about how to grow in your career and how to architect your own career growth. So the material I've prepped for you is kind of a summation of all the reading and research I've done over the years. So I'd love your feedback on all of it as well, like in the chat, real time. I'm sure we'll do plenty of discussion as we look at the material together. And yeah, just thanks again for having me. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk anytime. Give advice, take a look at your portfolio if you need. And with that, a little bit about the workshop and the material. So one thing to bear in mind as we look at the agenda and the lesson material here is I think it's applicable for anyone at any career stage, but in particular, I think it's helpful for those of us that are mid-career, where you've sort of been working up a slope at a certain angle and like you're always improving your hard skills and your communication skills and your networking, and all of that is sort of like building up as you spin cycles, time, year after year, month after month. But when it comes to getting into senior leadership, there's a vertex. The landscape changes, and all of a sudden the landscape becomes tougher and steeper. And what got you here might not get you there. So you sort of need to get new rock climbing equipment to add to your tool belt. And you may need to pick up a new skill here or there in order to make it through this more difficult turf. So this material is particularly kind of aimed at that. Like how do you realize that what got you here might not necessarily get you there, and how do you overcome the paradigm shifts that sometimes need to happen to get to the next level from being maybe a line level designer to a senior designer, or a senior designer to an exec or to a director. So just bear that in mind. And it's also for those of us that are driven. Like I want to start out by pointing out that like we all are here, like we've shown up to this event because there's this bright light of beating heart confidence that's shining from within. Like there's a deep belief in your own capabilities. And sometimes it can feel like the forces are conspiring against that, with the challenges that you face in the workplace. And so I very much want this material to like augment and extend that deep-seated energy that got you here, into this room. So bear that in mind as we move forward. Like the entire material is predicated on the fact that you want this and therefore you deserve it. So because you want it, I want, therefore I am. Like it's worthy of pursuing. Okay, so overview of the material itself. First, we're going to look at some slides. I've prepped some data and some bullet points to prime the material for you. We'll look at the state of women in leadership, particularly women in leadership in tech and design. I'll go through some material on what sponsorship and stretch assignments are in particular. Like those are going to be super specific levers that we're looking at for career advancement. And then we'll look at the 4 R's: resume, reputation, results, and relationships, and kind of deconstruct those and see how they're related to. So that's all sort of like textbook lecture material. It'll take us maybe 20-25 minutes to look at some of those concepts. And then the second part is going to be working. It's going to be an active workshop session where I'll ask you all to work with some worksheets. I think we may have emailed those out ahead of time. So if you have a moment, go ahead and pull those up in a browser tab and make a copy. I think they're both GDocs. We have a career board of directors inventory that we'll spend a few minutes filling out independently. Maybe Havana can play some of the lounge music while we do that. And then the same, we'll rinse and repeat and do the same exercise with a 3-year plan, and then reconvene and do a bit of a share out and a Q&A for those artifacts. So by the end of the session, you should come out with 2 pieces of paper in hand that have some tangible next steps and an intentional set of thoughts on what you can do with the material that we're looking at. So that's the plan. Let's go ahead and dive into the material with this landscape survey looking at women in leadership. So here's some data that I pulled. These numbers are fairly recent, and they should be sadly, probably pretty familiar to us all. We know that across all business sectors, like all industries, women occupy 7.4% of the CEO positions in the Fortune 1000, not even the Fortune 100. Fortune 1000, it's 7.4%. In tech overall, the number's even more kind of skewed. It goes down to 5% CEO or C-level positions held by women, and only 5% of startups are women owned worldwide. And then when it comes to design, there's a bit of a special disparity there. So in design, 53% of UX designers in the industry are female, yet 17% of design leadership positions are seated with women. So even though, there's more women in the industry and therefore more women in leadership levels, there's still a disparity of the representation with our function. It definitely begs the question, why? What's going on here? What is it about women? I think that's the $1 million question. What is it that makes this so gendered and such a broad and obvious disparity? I've spent a lot of time reading and thinking about this and gathering different data points. And the fact of the matter is there's so many explanations for it. There's many papers, articles, material, studies that have been done looking into explaining why this is. So the best high level answer I have to offer is that the landscape's just complex and multivariate. And there's everything you can imagine driving this gap: bias, cultural factors, to differences in the level of support that some employers offer versus others. However, throughout all of that chaos and all of the sort of complexity of the explanation, there are certain trends that we can tease out that are meaningful to look at. So with mid-career women in particular, the ones who sort of make it, to that senior designer level, that senior individual contributor, or even a line level manager, they're often at risk of opting out of being more ambitious in their careers. And maybe they decide to make a lateral move into a staff assignment or a coordination role. And it's because they get tired of their progression plateaus and they get burnt out, or they just sort of give up. And so they change what they want to go after. They settle. And that's a disturbing trend. Here's some information from this board member of Women Unlimited, who wrote her dissertation about this trend in particular. And in her research sort of highlighted the fact that part of the reason that this is happening is women tend to burn out, or they tend to opt out or make a lateral move because they're not actively engaged in the type of relationships that support their career growth and their leadership development, at least not in the same way that men or males are. And I can explain more as to why that is, what's missing there, or what's sort of culturally different about the way women engage in working relationships versus men. So specifically, unlike their male counterparts, women didn't have a personal board of directors curated to guide them through their organizational landscapes. And so they became frustrated with their lack of progress and with being stalled in place, and either opted out or took that lateral assignment. To mitigate this gap, for some reason, this comes natural to men, and I'll explain why, that happens. But in order to mitigate this, there are 2 specific levers that are more effective than others. Usually when it comes to women's empowerment or women's support initiatives, there's all kinds of great resources and programming available. There are conferences, there are lunches, retreats, support circles, workplace groups, group chats, email chains, even community like this one. These are all incredibly helpful and incredibly powerful to motivate and support women, provide that awesome layer of community. However, these are helpful, but they're not sufficient. Like, we shouldn't stop with these measures. They do move the needle, I would say, but only incrementally. When it comes to like literally getting promoted, like getting more women up into those C-level layers, especially in design, there's two specific levers that have been shown to tangibly move the needle here. And those are the two levers that I want to focus on for us today. The first lever is sponsorship. Sponsorship accounts for 20% of advancement and promotions. And we'll deep dive into what sponsorship is and what it means in just a moment. And then stretch assignments are kind of the other super powerful lever. So stretch assignments are basically what you need to secure in order to land a promotion. Like, you need to demonstrate performance at the next level through a stretch assignment, typically and ideally supported by a mentor or by a sponsor while you're doing that. And that, underpins close to 70% of promotions. So these two things, they can exist in isolation, but typically they do exist in relationship as well. And they're going to be the most powerful places to focus your energy and your time if your goal is to get over the hump of your career plateau, if you're worried about stalling in place or worried that you've come this far, but you don't know how to take it all the way to your career peak. These are the two things to focus on in order to get where you want to be. So with that, let's take a quick deep dive look at both of these levers a little bit more deeply and intentionally, and then we'll do some workshopping around them. So sponsorship, some important things to know here is sponsorship is different from mentorship. Sponsorship specifically is when a senior leader who has power takes their sponsee under their wing and actively guides them to the next level and advocates for their promotion or their advancement in a closed door talent review. It's completely different from mentorship. It's where the sponsor actually leads and guides the relationship. Usually a mentorship is led by the mentee, who has a set agenda of things that they want to learn about or questions that they have for their own growth. But with the sponsorship, it's a little bit more top-down led. And again, the statistic, sponsorship accounts for 20% of development and advancement. Here's a collection of different headlines, like just sort of showing the proof of the pudding from the media. Like, this has been reported on widely in the tech industry. Tech leaders and tech, especially large tech companies, have like come to realize that this is a key important lever. It's about sponsorship, not mentorship. And how is that model different? And how can we organizationally cultivate and support, women's advancement? And I highly recommend like looking up these articles and reading them. Like, they're great proof of the pudding that sponsorship truly is a game changer. A couple more facts, and again, not to get you down by these things, but I think it's important to just survey the landscape as it exists and look at the reality as it is. Women are sponsored less frequently and by more junior sponsors than their male peers. And the reason that this is sponsorship happens entirely through biased, unconscious human selection. People tend to select proteges, leaders tend to select proteges that remind them of themselves. Or that are somehow otherwise like very familiar to them. So this explains the gap that we were talking about before, just a moment ago, where men have a career board of directors because they're more similar to the males that are in power right now. So women, on the other hand, although they're more relational, there's less women in power that you can successfully convert into sponsors. And there are a few methods that we can take to intentionally counteract this bias that happens. And we'll definitely take a look at those in just a moment. Let's take a look at stretch assignments next, though, and then I'll sort of knit the two together so that we have a unified mental model of these two things. So stretch assignments specifically are projects that are going to be beyond an employee's current knowledge or skill and therefore, requiring that employee to need to stretch into the role or like do something that they're familiar, unproven at. And again, these are powerful lever for promotion. They're almost what's required for promotion. The two sponsorship and stretch assignments work together with another to power this advancement in this one sort of key way. Typically, it's going to be a sponsor, not always, but typically it's going to be a sponsor that taps their protege to fit into a stretch assignment. And then the sponsor takes responsibility for guiding them to success in that stretch element. So they take responsibility and they ensure their protege's success because they have skin in the game, right? Like they're invested in the success of their sponsee. So they will help with and coach and provide that guidance that the sponsee needs in order to succeed versus fail in the stretch assignment. And if all this goes as described, ideally the sponsor takes that success story of the stretch assignment of the sponsee and advocates for it behind closed doors and brokers a promotion outcome, leading to tangible growth and movement of the needle and movement of the numbers for that sponsee. So that's the mechanic at play. To sort of sum it up, in order to make this machinery work for you, you'll want to cultivate and convert a sponsor. And we'll talk about some methods to do that, like how you can approach various mentors and various supporters in your organization or outside your organization. And then eventually convert them into sponsors, like nurture the relationship and mature and deepen the relationship into a situation where you're more of a protege than you are a mentor. And then from there, this is where your 3-year plan will come into play. You'll want to intentionally scope out the landscape, your sort of longer term chessboard of opportunities in your organization, where there may be opportunity for you to step into a stretch role. And if your sponsor doesn't propose it themselves, you can ask for it and ask for their support in landing a successful outcome in that stretch assignment, and then use that positive proof to power a promotion. So I'm going to pause there. Let's see. Before we dive into a little bit more discussion around how to make these mechanics work for you, let me just check in with the group. How are these concepts landing, and is everything making sense so far? Like, anyone have any questions about the concepts or the key mechanic? And just jump in, unmute.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Yep.
I have a quick question. So this sounds interesting and makes a lot of logical sense, but how would this structure work outside of your current organization? There might not be necessarily a want, need, or space to grow within your current organization. If this isn't a protege situation,
yeah,
it sounds like it's still a protege construct. It's just kind of like almost rebranding it.
Yeah,
maybe slightly more equitable. Yep,
you're entirely correct in that you can be a protege but still not have a sponsor. Like you have to be sponsored by whoever it is that has the power and control to promote you. So it's typically going to be your manager or your skip level manager, or maybe even someone even higher up in the chain or higher up diagonally to you that has that ability. But that's not to say that you can still be a protege with somebody outside your organization or outside of your reporting line, and they can still help you to success in a stretch assignment and still achieve promotion that way. You just have to have the positive regard of the people who have the power to promote you, if that makes sense.
I guess it makes sense, but I guess I'm trying to figure out how this helps elevate like people on a larger scale when it can only be done within the confines of your current employment.
I guess that's where the change happens, though, right? Like it happens within the confines of your current employment. And definitely if it's not possible, like if this is a goal and it's simply not possible, then I would say like you have to sort of manage your career, right? And look like find opportunities where roles are available in the organization, like so that you could get promoted, if that makes sense. I might not be understanding your question. Like, does that answer your question, or am I missing some nuance there?
I guess I'm just at a scale how this really like lifts and elevates people, because it's so restrictive on the fact that you have to be promoted within your role.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the levers exist on a personal level. So it's grassroots by nature, like, and like a lot of this material is focused on like what you can do. Like it's actions that you can take. I think that said, like, I think that there's still a lot of work to be done, like at a macro level and a macro scale. There are a lot of good organizations out there, and like companies too, that do institutionalized sponsorship programs. And there are articles out there that you can read about, like case studies where, you know, orgs have taken responsibility for this and like implemented specific programs where they recruit like women and underrepresented minorities, and have like they do formal sponsoring, where they set up this like intentional runway for leaders to sponsor people that they wouldn't normally or naturally select, and they sort of give them the support materials and the programming and the extra runway required for that relationship to be nurtured. But yeah, it's definitely not going to fix like this. These are the mechanics. Like it's definitely not a silver bullet to fix all this at scale. So
Yeah, no, that was helpful. Thank you.
yeah.
I see a question from Bry in the chat, and they ask, is this viewed mainly in the lens of leading others or a team? Would this also apply if you're interested in advancing as an individual contributor?
It's mostly, the material's mostly targeted at individuals. I'm sure some of the concepts could apply to teams though.
And Ariel's got her hand raised. Go ahead, Ariel.
Yeah, I had a question around, because I know you said you were going to talk about like how to nurture the relationships with the sponsor. It's interesting that we're having this because I'm trying to figure out right now the way that my organization is structured. My manager essentially is like the best advocate for me.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's the best advocate for me. So, like how to assess whether or not the person that you're thinking about out of force sometimes being your sponsor in order for you to do well or elevate, how do you basically evaluate whether or not you should take on that sort of relationship with them?
It's such a good question. Like understanding where to invest your energies, and like who's going to be the most likely person of authority to convert into a sponsor, like absolutely something worth assessing. And when we get to the career board of directors inventory, that's where we'll look outside of your direct reporting line for those relationships that you can cultivate. And you can leverage those relationships to influence your manager from the side. Like, so their perception of you isn't strictly based on like your one-to-one relationships. Like they'll listen to their peers, right? Or their diagonal up reports. So you want to look at the full portfolio of relational possibilities that you have, even outside of your function, and figure out a way to work that net a bit. And like you go think outside your own sphere of influence and how you can influence others who can influence your manager. That helps. Yeah. But yeah, we'll do that. We'll take a look at a whole construct of the web of relationships in the workplace, and then we'll inventory your prospects for that. So pretty good stuff. Good questions all around. Okay, great. I'm glad I paused. And let's continue on and let's cut a layer deeper into these concepts and see what other questions come out. And then we'll have plenty of room for Q&A at the end too, after we work through some of the worksheets. And kind of picking up on the theme, I guess, from the good seg, that last question was, so landing a sponsor, it's actually really hard. Like I talk about it as if it's like, oh yeah, all you need to do is get this one thing, a sponsor, but it can take years to cultivate and grow, or to sort of canvas and nurture and land. So I think the kind of the conventional way to go about it is to engage with mentors, like ideally more than one, until you establish great trust and interpersonal chemistry with one or more of them. And then you convert them into that sponsor protege type of relationship. And there's a give and take to that, where you build loyalty and you're able to sort of establish that trusted go-to nature there. So quantity is one aspect. Like you're definitely going to need to affect this process with more than one person within your professional sphere. And then quality, so converting a mentor may require a longer and more intentional investment in the relationship. So you might not be able to get away with just showing up to the one-on-one and winging it. Like you may need to have a little bit more intentional tools with you to super intentionally think about what you want this person to do, think, or feel after their interaction with you, and literally plan for that. Like, invest some moments in the morning as you're reflecting on your meetings for the day, what you have ahead, like what is the one thing that you want your mentor who you're courting for a sponsorship to carry away from that meeting, and go into it with a plan, rehearse it if you have to. Like some people are really good improvising, verbally, but others need to be a little more scripted. And I think, you can do whatever feels comfortable for you. But I don't think that's a thing that's really widely taught anywhere, that, sometimes like relationships become so important in the workplace that sometimes it literally takes like intentional planning of them and intentional reflection, especially if you have a bad interaction, like reflecting about it in a dedicated journal entry afterward and thinking, what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? What could I have done differently? What will I do differently in the future to ensure that there's a better outcome from that? All right, so let's look at a few more things. So we talked about how acquiring or landing a sponsor can be supported by developing a range of relationships in the workplace. And if you can't convert your primary mentor or your manager or your skip manager into a sponsor, you may be able to connect to more sponsor candidates through a cross-functional peer or some other lateral relationship. And we'll look at that in a moment. And then of course you should always lean on like your peer relationships and a few other relationships to learn more about your mentors and sponsors. And like, you can use that information to up your relationships quality with your potentials that you're courting. And so here's a bit of here's a construct that I think is worth kind of looking at for a few minutes. So it can be a bit confusing, so I'll break it down. On the y-axis, like running up and down, there are going to be relationships that you have that are one-on-one, and then you're going to have relationships that are kind of in a group, like at the team level or in, sort of community. And then on the x-axis, from left to right, you have systemically guaranteed relationships that are formally in place, like that are set up by your organization. So you're going to have a manager, you're going to have a skip level manager. Work buddy may be a little bit more, I guess, self-serve, but I guess I think about this like when you have an onboarding buddy. If you join, sometimes you're assigned, you may be assigned a mentor or assigned an onboarding buddy when you're new. And then kind of on the other side, like to the right, are more like self-serve relationships where you may opt to join in an employee resource group or maybe an external support group, just like this one. You may also hire an external coach, or you may have a lovely external mentor that you use outside of the org. And at the very, very top is the sponsor. It's not exactly systemically guaranteed, but it's in your system of the organization that you're in. And ideally, all of the relationships below will support and enhance, help make you be your best self, so that you can have the best chances of having that all-important sponsor. Okay, so the other piece of material I wanted to sort of break down from a construct standpoint and plug into this mental model of promotion pursuit is the 4 Rs, the mountain of the 4 Rs: resume, relationship, results, and reputation. So let's take a look at those and kind of how they build on each other, and then I'll map them to the sponsor and stretch assignments dynamic. So if you think about your career as sort of a pyramid, like with a stable base that everything else is built on, definitely reputation would be at the base of that mountain. How you're perceived and, you know, what others generally think of you, it's going to kind of bias and color everything that you do. Like, you could have the best results ever. You could deliver like the most amazing results. But if you have this bad reputation of being, you know, mean, or you have a reputation of steamrolling people, like that's always going to sort of take away from the results. It's going to make less the hard truth of the numbers that you deliver. So reputation is just, it's a very important thing to like protect and curate. And on top of your reputation, definitely results are probably, I think, the next most important thing. Like, you do have to have, you know, solid work output and work outcomes and delivery, like success stories that you can point to where you executed well, or you contributed to one of the company's objectives or priorities. So absolutely something to court and protect as well, like your ability to deliver well. And then, so as those two things build up over time, as you build your reputation and as you build your results, that populates your resume. So you sort of have this track record and this pedigree of your progression and of your growth over time. Your trajectory is sort of expressed in this resume of results. So that's also something to like intentionally think about, like, you know, maybe this year or this month you were able to achieve this thing and you were able to enhance your reputation in XYZ ways. Now, how do you want to build on that? And how do you want to continue to structure your resume of results to reflect the trajectory that you want for yourself in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years? So resume is a great tool to just sort of cap off and use as a tracker for your resume, your reputation and results. And then wrapping all of this, like sort of like existing as the ether and the matrix, you know, in and amongst all of your results and reputation and your resume are relationships. Those are where you're able to achieve traction with your proposals and with your results, learn what you need to learn to do well, and also learn from other people and sort of build your influence and your followership. So that's kind of how I see all these things like stack upon each other and relate. If we square it by the sponsorship and the stretch assignment piece, if you focus on the super top part, like the cap of the pyramid, your stretch assignments are going to be like what are just outside the range of what you're capable of from a results. Like, they're going to be building off of the top of the peak of the best stuff that you've been able to achieve from a results standpoint. And the same thing for your resume. Like, it's going to be stuff that you're putting on your resume that's like right at the level of what you're capable of, and then pushing even a little bit further out. The sponsorship piece is going to be the portion of a relationship that supports that stretch result and resume portion, like that's supporting like that whole cap of the pyramid that you're reaching for. So hopefully that makes sense, and that sort of squares the model a bit and like provides a bit of a visual and mental model for how all these things kind of come together, and how to be intentional in thinking about these things. This was another thing, you know, again, kind of called out by Dr. Racioppi's dissertation. She noticed this trend, like as she was interviewing women CEOs and women leaders, that the ones who really did have the mettle to like really overcome that barrier, like break through that ceiling, were the ones who approached these things with tremendous intentionality. And by intentionality, like they came into every engagement with the plan, like whether it was a meeting for the day, like a one-to-one interaction with their manager or with someone important in their org, or whether it was on a macro level, looking at their, let's say they intentionally entered into a job engagement thinking that they're going to be there for 3 years and they're going to learn these 3 things and they're going to achieve this level, and then they're going to move on to the next thing to get to the next level in 10 years. Like, that's sort of that was a key like a key aspect to what helped women sort of get through. They didn't wing it. They had a plan that involved literally writing things down and thinking and reflecting, and then actioning on those goals. So I think that's out of everything here, like I think that's kind of one of the most important takeaways. Like I know I wasn't really taught to be super intentional about things like relationships. Like I thought that you would just naturally show up and just do them. Like they should just flow from, you know, random spontaneity. But definitely since reading this material, like that's definitely changed my outlook. And I definitely budget intentional time at the beginning and at the end of the week to reflect on how my meetings went. Did I feel good about my interaction with my boss this week? And what did I learn? What could I do differently? You know, it's definitely been a helpful practice. So yeah, and that's backed up by research. This is a key element that helps that help these women get ahead. And so I'm recommending it as part of this material if this is the level that you want to aspire to, or even not, even if you just want to get a little bit further ahead. I think it's an important thing to think about and just add to your tool belt. So with that said, I think that kind of concludes the material portion before we dive into some working material. So I'll pause one more time just for, I loved your questions before, like any other thoughts, questions on the material? And, you know, I welcome debate and pushback, like bring on the spicy questions. Anyone have any thoughts or reflections? And I'd also love to know, is this helpful or is it obvious? Or is it helping kind of open your eyes a little bit more versus being on autopilot in your career? Yeah, jump in.
Nia, go ahead, Nia.
Okay. Hey, I just had a question. This just popped in my head. It's not the question that I put in the chat, but are there any instances of someone like you having your eye on like someone for you to request sponsorship from them? I know you have to like seek them out first, and then maybe they have someone else in mind that they're gonna do that for. Like, how would you navigate that? It's kind of like,
Yeah.
You trying to like date professionally or something.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to compare it.
Totally.
Like, to get chose in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, it is like it's just human chemistry. Like I think that it helps to know, like, if you know, if you're just not connecting with someone, like you may really badly want your skip manager to like sponsor you, right? You want them to be your hero and have them take you under their wing. But like if they just don't like you, you know, or if there's just no chemistry there, like there's no two-way push and pull to the relationship. So it's almost better to sort of cut your investment there and work around your skip manager and like look for other people who can either change their mind about you or just convert those other people as a sponsor. It depends on how promotions work in your company. Like, I think that's an important thing to consider is, you know, are talent reviews formal? Like, are they run by HR or are they just like, who knows how they happen? They happen in smoke-filled rooms. Like, typically if you work for a director or a senior director or a VP, like they're going to have cross-functional partners that they have to listen to. So if you're able to secure one of their partners as a sponsor because you have better chemistry and just a better relationship and you've invested positively in that person's relationship, then it should work out okay. Like, you should be able to convert a good outcome from that, ideally. Or at least you've taken a really good bet and you've done your best, taken your best strategic shot at leveraging that sideways relationship. I don't think typically, I don't think there's like an upper limit to the number of sponsors that senior leaders have. Like, they can sponsor more than one person. But yeah, in general, I think, like, and this is the way I've looked at my relationships. Like, if I can't achieve good hooks with any one particular leader, then I'll just accept the relationship for what it is and then attempt to build and cultivate around and elsewhere, if that helps. But yeah, it's treacherous. Like, there are no guarantees, and you know, you're not like, not everybody is like super likable. Like, I definitely, believe it or not, I've always been socially awkward, so I feel like I have to work extra hard and like literally research, like, how do you build rapport with people? How do you learn how to be humorous? You know, but it is important. Great question.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see, Diana, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much. I think this content really resonates with me so much. I am mid-level and I've actually never had or never attended any talk of this nature. So I didn't really know anything about sponsorships or stretch assignments. So I'm super grateful for your talk today. And then I wanted to ask you in regard to how things are right now. I am in the job hunt. And if I were to start soon a new opportunity, how long would I have to wait to seek out someone that could be a potential sponsor?
Yeah. So when you're in your position, you kind of have this opportunity to interview really well and get hired up a level. So that's kind of the opportunity that's immediately in front of you. Or at least that's the most like short-term sort of promo through external hire thing that's within immediate grasp. And I think you should totally go for that. Like, you know, leverage all of your practice and like your external mentors and like everything you possibly can to try to achieve that. I've seen other people do that, like literally jump from senior manager to director through interviewing externally and landing a role at the next level up. So that's like your immediate opportunity. And then no matter what happens, like when you get hired into your new organization, yeah, you kind of have to start from scratch. Like you have to build all of your relationships from the ground up. There are some algorithms for how to do this faster. Like you don't have to just go about it organically. You can be super intentional and like expedient about crafting a roadmap of people to meet with and people to talk with and like how to sort of ramp up your chemistry and your bonds like fairly quickly through questioning and through quick, easy, tangible wins is usually like the best way to get like an accelerated foothold in your relationships. But yeah, that's kind of a thing. Like, and that's like anytime you change roles, like even if it's internal or external, you're always gonna have to learn the new domain, right? Like there's gonna be 3 to 6 months of like just learning, right?
Yes.
And that's just, it's overhead, right? But it's good though. Like it's like even though it's costly, like that's the quote unquote time lost, just learning something new, like you still gain because you're cultivating like a whole new set of contacts and relationships. It's a fresh slate and a fresh start, and you're learning new stuff. Like it's new proving grounds to sort of try out and experiment things. So yeah, you have to kind of take the trade-offs when it comes to role changes.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, a great question.
I see Susanna.
Susanna, yeah.
Sorry, I have something to say. First of all, great presentation. I think it definitely brings a lot of value. From my point of view, for those of you who doesn't know me, my name is Therese Mushock. I'm lead UX architect at Cox Automotive. I've been a lead for quite a few years now. So I definitely get your point about climbing in the organization. That's the right way to do it. Make sure that you definitely set up some one-on-ones with your managers, and make sure that you know your team, like build those relationships as much as possible, because definitely is what is going to help you to go, besides your skills, of course, is what is going to help you to go to the next level. Now, my advice for those of you that may be juniors or hiring currently in an internship position, is fine if you look for second opinions. Like, let's imagine right now that you're working on a project, but you are not sure about your skills, because, like, it's normal. In the way we gain experience is how actually we are going to feel more comfortable and confident with our skills. So feel free to go to, if you know any senior designer, that even doesn't need to be in your organization. Hey, what do you think about this? Am I applying the design principles right? Am I doing something wrong? Do you understand this? That's what's definitely also going to help you to get that confidence and to feel more comfortable in trying to move with your skills. sometimes like I'm not doing mentorships anymore because I'm swamped with work. But for example, one of the girls that you guys had here, I was her mentor, and even we were not part of the same organization, but I will be like, okay, bring me the projects you're working on it. Let me review it. Let me tell you like what are the things that you can improve, how you are applying the design principles, how you are not applying the design principles. Let me see your resume, your portfolio, those type of things. Those are things that you guys can do with anyone I'm sure in this group. We are going to be able to help you. So it's not, to me, respectfully, it's not about just doing things in your organization. It's also about doing things for yourself as a professional and making sure that you are setting up yourself for success inside an organization and outside an organization.
I couldn't agree more. Like I think like it's for all this focus on promotion as an outcome, like the quality of your learning and growth is like no less important. Like I think that's like a really great balanced feedback to add. Yeah, great stuff. Are there any other, am I missing any questions in the chat before we move on? And by the way, time check, Havana, do we have about 18 minutes?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next part. There are a couple other questions, but we can take them at the end if we have time.